be the next chairman of the Federal Reserve.
You could say Ben was the academic who grew up studying the mistakes made in the Great Depression, why financial systems matter to economies. You know, Hank could spend his life in markets, and I'd spend my life in the policy world, really dealing with financial crises.
I first met Tim when he became the president of the New York Fed. Well, the New York Fed is probably the most important of the 12 Federal Reserve banks, and the president of the New York Fed has traditionally been the Fed's eyes and ears on Wall Street.
I think we all had something in common, which is, anybody who'd grown their life in markets understands that markets aren't always self-correcting. So I think we all shared a view about this tenuous fragility of the system, and we really did trust each other.
When I arrived in July of 2006, I thought there was a very good chance that in the 2.5 years I was in Washington, we would be facing a financial crisis. But the things that I was concerned about turned out not to be the biggest problem.
It was March 13th, which happens to be my birthday. I was at Avra, this Greek restaurant down here with my parents, my family. The CEO of Bear Stearns called me. It was maybe 9 o'clock at night and said, Jamie, I need $29 billion before Asia opens or we're gonna have to declare bankruptcy. And I said, Alan, I can't possibly lend you $29 billion overnight.
Bear Stearns, one of the most admired firms in America, now one of the most in danger.
The firm has been buffeted by constant rumors of a looming liquidity problem.
What happened at Bear Stearns was the first true demonstration of what the crisis looked like, because it was a crisis of confidence. Bear Stearns owned a huge piece of the housing business, and they had taken on some of the worst risk. All of a sudden, all sorts of investors on Wall Street said, I don't think that Bear Stearns is good for the money. And not only do I not think they're good for the money, I got to get my money out of there immediately.
Bear Stearns is the biggest casualty yet of the nation's mortgage mess.
The company has become a poster boy for the real estate bubble.
We knew that there are excesses in housing, and we missed it totally. Homeownership went, very sadly, from shelter to an investment. When I had joined Goldman Sachs in 1974, the industry was growing in many ways. You saw an evolution in modern finance. You began to see different forms of securitizations.
Mortgage-backed securities really came into being in the 1980s. They started as a really good idea, which made a lot of sense, which was a way to take mortgages, package them up, and sell off the cash flows. So an investor would buy a portion of all these mortgages, and the mortgages would pay that investor. And the idea was that made investing in mortgages much less risky, because instead of investing in just me, you were investing in 1,000 people.
As we moved to securitization, we had cheaper mortgages. If you could afford 20% down, fine. But if you couldn't, let's say you have 5%, let's say you had 1%, let's say you had 0%. We came up with all these ways to get loans to more people. You know, it was certainly felt exciting at the time that we were gonna spread the American dream all over the place.
It's a record year for housing, and it shows no signs of abating.
In the early 2000s, the price of borrowing to finance a house was very low, very attractive.
These exotic loans have exploded in the last 3 years.
Interest-only loans, adjustable rate loans, no down payment options.
People who were earning like $1,000 a month working as a gardener or working as a hairstylist saying they were making $10,000 a month because you could do these things called stated income loans, which came to be known as liar loans, where you could just say, here's what I make, and nobody would check. And so you could get away with murder.
Demand for these million-dollar-plus homes has outpaced supply.
You got speculators buying multiple houses, people are flipping.
Your neighbor who's not as smart as you are, but nevertheless went out and bought a couple of houses and flipped them, is now driving a better car than you are. And you say, yeah, that does make pretty good sense. I wish I'd started earlier.
As the housing market heated up, there were asset management firms around the world that all wanted a way to benefit.
Most things on Wall Street start with a concept that makes a lot of sense. The thing about Wall Street is they take everything to an extreme.
They take thousands of mortgages and staple them together. And they go to investors and they say, what do you want? You want safe? You want risky? We got all these mortgages.
There was an incentive to chop up these loans because along the way, there was a profit, a fee to take for each institution that somehow touched every piece of the loan.
Goldman Sachs, with quarterly profits up 93%.
Everyone was making a lot of money because of the housing market, liquidity, globalization.
Top executives will earn as much as $20 to $50 million each.
Just the booming 2000s, people were making so much money. And I could make 10, 15, 20, 30, 100 to $200 million. And there was this competition, which was ridiculous.
Chuck Prince was the CEO of Citigroup, and he had an amazing line, which was, while the music's playing, you gotta dance.
Big bonuses are driven simply by profits and competition.
Everybody was looking at the success of Goldman Sachs and of Morgan Stanley and of Lehman Brothers, all of whom were making more and more profits.
The company will distribute a record high $16.5 billion in compensation.
So there was this remarkable pressure on everybody to keep dancing.
Another part of what drove this was belief that home prices would never go down.
The shaky housing market starting to crack at the foundation.
Particularly hard-hit markets, Miami, Vegas, Northern Virginia, and right here in D.C.
Historically, house prices have been somewhat disconnected across different parts of the country, but this housing bubble did end up being national, and it did have implications for the whole economy.
The real estate bubble, everybody knows, has burst.
This is the hangover after the great frat party you went to.
House prices started to fall. The economy started to slow.
Those adjustable rate mortgages are now coming due.
People who had bought these adjustable rate mortgages, when they started to reset, they couldn't afford to make the higher payments. They tried to refinance them, but their house prices declined in value, so they couldn't refinance them.
Foreclosures are up over 1,000%.
Some people start defaulting on their mortgage payments, and now that begins to ripple through.
It was very, very bad. A lot of people lost their homes. A lot of people lost their savings.
Those falling home prices are like an infection, now spreading throughout the U.S. economy.
The system's not designed to function in an environment where house prices are going down. So these mortgage-backed securities start to unravel, and you got problems.
Investor confidence in the mortgage financing space is not doing well.
There was so little transparency and so little confidence in these securities that financial institutions were struggling.
I looked at one offering of mortgage-backed securities. I would have had to read over 300,000 pages to analyze that mortgage.
I had some of the smartest people in America couldn't explain to me what some of these instruments meant. And it was just like inventing more and more product in order to achieve higher and higher returns. And we're taking bigger and bigger risks.
Unfortunately, maybe this is the weakness of the street back then.
How aggressive does he want to be? Maybe a lot.
I think discipline was kind of lacking. It was ourselves, Lehman, Goldman, Bear Stearns, others. The amount of risk we were taking was out of control.
Today, Bear Stearns stock dropped nearly 50%, a loss of $3 billion.
It's a rapid change in Bear Stearns over the past 48 hours. It reintroduces anxieties about what's not known.
A complete lack of confidence in Bear Stearns, a run on the bank. The Fed's job is to prevent a catastrophe.
This was a four-alarm fire. It became very clear to us that Bear Stearns wasn't going to exist on Monday if there wasn't a solution. The markets were so fragile and so interconnected that we were going to have to do some pretty repugnant things if we were going to save the American economy for the American people.
Hank came in and said, Bear Stearns is failing, and we got to do something about it. And my first reaction was, why? They made bad investments, Hank. And sadly, the people that invested in Bear Stearns, and sadly, those who worked for Bear Stearns are going to have to pay the price of working for an entity that made bad investment. He said, you don't understand. If they fail, it's going to affect the international financial system.
I had been told there was no authority for the Fed or anyone else to guarantee the liabilities of a failing non-bank. There is nothing